All right, so that's another example, but here I want to make things even more interesting. So what I'll do in the next example is I'll add a random background on hover. So now this background will be fully random. Since my code is a little bit taller than the available screen, I'll press the F11 key on my keyboard to make it expand the full height of the viewport. And now I can see my entire code here. So I've got the random BG on hover function declaration. It accepts an element. Then I'm saving the document query selector of EL to target EL. Then I'm running the add event listener function, listening for a mouse over event, and I'm invoking the style dynamizer function. Now the style dynamizer function is a little bit improved from what I've had previously. So here I'm declaring a 0 to 255, which returns a value from 0 to 255, and that value becomes the value of RGB, and that way I can have a random RGB color by adding together the three random returns of numbers between 0 and 255. So effectively this becomes, for example, 10, this becomes 50, this becomes 129. It's just some random numbers, right? And then instead of hard coding like I had in the previous example, where I had tomato, olive, plum, this time I'm actually using the value of the random color, and I'm coloring the target element that I got here with the target element's background with this random color. So now when I invoke the random BG on hover function, I give it an H1, and let me now press the F11 again and Control S to save this. And now when I click, or actually when I hover over the H1 element, I'm getting completely random color values. So that's, I guess, a pretty interesting and nice experiment right here. But to make things even more interesting, I guess, I'm going to give you another example where I'll change the style of any clicked on element on the page. So here's the code for that. I have the style dynamize function, and I have an element. Once this element is received, again, I have the dice variable saving some random value between 0 and 1. And then based on the value, I'm coloring the element with tomato, the element's background with tomato, olive, or plum. And I'm adding an event listener this time to the entire window object. So whenever you mouse over anything, that event will be captured, and then I'll access the target element of this event, and then I'll access its style, then the color on the style property, and finally I'll invoke the style dynamize with the e.target being passed in for this element. So what that will do is basically when I Control S, and now when I hover, every single element on this page will start getting different colors. And now I can do something similar to what I've done previously to combine some of the things that I had earlier. I can now completely randomize the style of any clicked on element on this page. So I'll select all of this, Control V to paste my solution. And now I have a function 0 to 255 separated or extracted from inside the style dynamize function, because previously I had it inside of here. And then the style dynamize function is invoking 0 to 255 for R, G, and B, setting the random color like we've seen previously, setting the dice value, the random dice value of 0 to 1, and then using this random color to style the element's background, right? So when I save all of this, now it will still work nicely. But there is an even better way to improve all of this, because now I have some redundancy in my code. So to do that, let me show you the final version. So I'm randomizing the style of any clicked on element on the page, where I'm extracting the 0 to 255 function, actually adding it to the global scope rather than the scope of the style dynamize function. So the 0 to 255 and the style dynamize function are now both in global scope. And then I'm just invoking the 0 to 255 3 times, saving that to the R, G, and B variables, setting that to the random color value. And perhaps here, as a nice touch or a nice additional explanation, this RGB using template literals really is just this thing right here. That's what it ends up looking like. So there's no really some weird thing happening in the background. It's just simply generating randomly this kind of a string. And then that's what's being assigned to the value of random color. And then finally, contrary to the previous examples, where I've had to build the dice variable and then based on the value of the dice variable decide whether the background is going to be this olive or tomato or whatever. Even here it's redundant. We didn't really have to use it. So a simplification from this looks like this. We simply just set the random color variable to the value of el.style.background. And then, since we have the mouse over event listener, whenever you mouse over anything, this style dynamize will be invoked with that event's target passed in as an element, and that's what will result in the following. And if I wanted to make it even a bit more interesting, I could just add this thing right here. And now I have almost like some kind of a interesting color game where when you hover you get random colors, but when you click on an element it changes the color of the text.